name's Daniel Earlywine. I'm a research specialist for Dr. Lee Miller, who's the Extension Turfgrass Pathologist here at the University of Missouri. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do as a research specialist out here at MU South Farms. We have about 28 acres worth of turf grasses out here with quite a variety from both warm season and cool season turf grasses. Our warm season grasses, we focus mainly on zoysia grass and Bermuda, but our cool season turf grasses, we focus a lot of our research on tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, and perennial rye. But as you can see behind us here, we also have creeping bentgrass, which we would typically find on a golf course. We do a lot of research looking at different pathogens for both warm and cool season turf grasses that affect them at different time periods throughout the season, from March all the way into November. And in some cases, we have diseases such as snow mold that we see during the winter months. So part of my job as a research specialist is product testing. So not only do I work with our graduate students looking at different disease trials, but we also work with cooperators with different chemical companies, testing products that have been on the market for 20 to 30 years, which we use as an industry standard, but we also test products that are in experimental formulations that haven't been released yet. And we look at these products at different pathogens on both warm and cool season turf grasses to evaluate them on season-long disease control, either preventative before we see symptoms, but also curative after we see symptoms in the field. We test these products and evaluate them throughout the growing season so we can put the data together to give turf managers better results down the road to what they can utilize as a tool. One of the big factors in it is we evaluate application timing, whether it's 7, 14, 21 days in between applications. But we look at it overall, looking at the turf grass quality. Do we see issues where not only diseases are an issue, but other factors such as environmental? Do we get too much rainfall throughout the growing months? Are we seeing more summer stress that we typically see on a creeping bentgrass screen that can decline the grass or thin out the turf grass canopy? And so I test these based on our standards to look at disease control throughout the growing season. Today I'm going to focus on creeping bentgrass, which we see here. So this is one of our trials looking at residual control late in the season, and this is a picture of our untreated control here, and you can see there's a lot of disease pressure within this plot area. A lot of dollar spot, which you can actively see, which looks more that tannish color lesion. We have a little bit of blue-green algae, a little moss in this plot. But you can see that's an untreated control, so nothing's been applied to it throughout the growing season. When we move next to it, we can see this is an industry standard. We're starting to see a little bit of breakthrough in the plot here as well. I'm not holding on as long, as far as about 6 weeks out since the last application. But if we move to the next one, this is a newer product that was just released on the market this past year called Maxtima. Being 6 weeks out on creeping bentgrass greens, providing really good control of dollar spot late in the season, which could be a valuable tool to use late in the growing season as far as late summer, that may give you an extended period of disease suppression going into the fall months. When we talk about aerification, verticutting, and trying to recoup a lot of the summer stress as far as decline in creeping bentgrass. This is another trial looking at an untreated control as far as residual disease suppression after a growing season. Untreated control, a lot of dollar spot pressure, algae, a little bit of brown patch still holding on in this plot too from the summer months, so it's still recovering from the damage it's caused there. But if we move right next to it, you can see this plot's fairly clean. This plot was treated with Lexicon at a higher rate, and this is 6 weeks since the last application was made, and providing really good control of dollar spot, versus if we move to the next plot over, an industry standard, where we see a lot of breakthrough with diseases. This is the last trial looking at an untreated control in our first rep here. You can see a lot of disease pressures, particularly dollar spot. Move to the next plot, we can see our untreated versus, this is a Certainty. This is a new product released by Syngenta this year. Holding on really well. We see a little bit of dollar spot starting to show up in the plots, but again, 6 weeks out on a creeping bentgrass green in the fall with very little dollar spot pressure, doing fairly well. This plot here is looking at Brisquet at an extremely low rate 6 weeks after application. The next plot over is Brisquet at a higher rate, and then Brisquet at a 3 times rate based on the label, looking at residual dollar spot control in the fall. This last plot here, the last 2 plots I'm going to show, this is Posterity Forte, a new product released by Syngenta this year. This is 6 weeks after the last application, looking at residual dollar spot control in the fall. And this is at a low rate. And if we move over to the next plot, this is at a high rate, 6 weeks since the last application was made.
So here what we have is a nematicide trial. So on sand-based putting greens in particular in the state, we have a problem with a number of different plant parasitic nematodes. In some regions of the state we have sting nematodes, which is the biggest, baddest nematode there is. But throughout the state we really are seeing more problems with a nematode called the lance nematode. The lance nematode is both an ectoparasite and an endoparasite. And what that means is that it's parasitic and feeds on the outside of the roots, but also actually gets inside the roots. It's problematic also because it's a very, very big nematode. It is second to the sting nematode as far as our turf parasitic nematodes that we worry about. So here in this trial, we're evaluating 7 different nematicides. Here we are sampling in a randomized grid. This is our 4th sampling on this trial. We have another trial that we're doing with a cooperator golf course site in St. Louis as well, where we've actually inoculated lance nematodes on those. Here on this site, we also are having root knot nematode issues, another problematic nematode species, as well as we see ring and also stunt nematodes that can cause damage in Missouri. Lucky for everyone else, and not for golf course superintendents, this really is a sand-based putting green issue. We do not see these issues when we get into lawns. Sand-based sports fields maybe, but really it all has to do with having the bigger pore space, because nematodes need areas to swim around, and our really tight soils here in Missouri don't give that kind of space for most of our turf parasitic nematodes. So this is our second product evaluation trial looking at control of lance nematodes. As I said earlier, lance nematodes is now kind of taken the crown as the most problematic nematode on golf course putting greens. It's the second largest nematode that we deal with, and it actually feeds from outside the root, so it's an ectoparasite, and also actually digs its way inside the root and is an endoparasite. In doing so, it actually opens up pathways for other pathogens to get in, and of course that really impacts the root's integrity. So here in this trial, we're testing a product that actually is not a synthetic nematicide, but is actually derived from heat-killed bacteria. So those bacteria produce an antibiotic. The bacteria is Burkholderia. And actually, we're testing that to see if it's going to suppress these lance nematode populations. You can tell here that I'm not at South Farms. We actually do work throughout the state. So this is one of our fine cooperators, and they are allowing us to use their nursery green, which has some higher lance nematode populations, so we can conduct this study. You're also going to notice that we have a very intense gridding pattern here. We know that nematode populations are randomly aggregated, so they're clustered together. So we're trying to hit those clusters throughout each one of our plots. You also notice that we're actually only testing one nematicide here, but we're doing that with the addition of wetting agents and with other products in there to see if we can, again, enhance that efficacy and produce this fine turf quality. You'll also notice that we actually have 4 replications here. So one of the anecdotes is that this nematicide that we're testing does work on these lance nematode populations. But we do this through 4 replications so that we can statistically analyze and evaluate the product's effectiveness. We also pair it with an untreated control to see what happens if you do nothing. Or we take all of the components out and look at those individually so we can get a good picture of what this nematicide is actually doing and what kind of control and quality that we're actually getting out of it. We do a number of variety trials here at the University of Missouri Turfgrass Research Farm located on South Farms. We are fortunate in Missouri that we have very warm summers and very cold winters. And what that means is that we can grow any plant we want to, we just can't grow any of them very well. So what we do here at the Turfgrass Research Center is we evaluate a number of different turfgrass species. And what I mean by that is Bermuda grass, zoysia grass, which are both warm season species that will do well in the summer. But we also evaluate Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue, which are commonly used on home lawns. And then also for golf courses, we evaluate creeping bentgrass. And then for sports fields, we also will do some work with perennial ryegrass. But what you might not realize is that within these species, there also are a number of different cultivars or varieties. And these varieties might perform differently in our very challenging conditions. So what we're doing here is we're establishing a Kentucky bluegrass variety trial. And the idea is that we're going to challenge them for the next 5 seasons to really look at which one of these cultivars are going to perform the best. They're going to have the most disease tolerance. They're going to have the most heat and stress tolerance. They're going to be the ones that are going to really make it through all of our challenging conditions. The idea is that we fail here so you don't have to when you take the product home. It's our first sweater weather morning here in September. It's a perfect time then to seed cool season turfgrass. You should be doing that in your lawn. But here we are doing a national turfgrass evaluation program trial. And what that is a number of universities throughout the country. It's in the 20, maybe 22 different universities, all get together and we test different varieties of turfgrasses across a range of different climates. So this particular trial is a bentgrass trial. Bentgrass is used on golf course putting greens. And if you think that you have it bad in your home lawns, then think about how hard it is to manage a cool season turfgrass in the summer while you're mowing it to 1/10 of an inch or below. So what we do, again, we go out and we get these varieties of this species and we test them under the very challenging conditions of Missouri. We basically are putting them under the same stresses that a golf course would encounter. And again, the idea is that we test these varieties, put them through their druthers, and we actually can fail here, whereas on a golf course, they can't fail. So we try to make sure that they get the best varieties available so they can reduce the number of inputs they put in, hopefully save some money, and still provide that great product to the golfer.
So I wanted to give you a brief overview of what these plots look like after we've got the growth covers off and after we've got a couple weeks of establishment. So this is the Kentucky Bluegrass Variety Trial. Again, this is 52 varieties replicated 3 times. You can see that they're coming in fairly well after we've got the growth cover off. This is on a native soil, so there is some background fertility there. We've got pretty good pH here, somewhere around the 6. We want pH to be somewhere in the 6 to 6.5 range. So we're in a great spot there, and we're getting a good release of nutrients, and we're seeing some good establishment. The NTEP bentgrass variety trial, you can see, doesn't have quite as much establishment. This is 2 days younger, so this is 12 days. This is right after we've got the growth cover off. But again, this is a sand-based putting green, and the reason that putting greens are sand-based is because of drainage. So it's very important for athletic field surfaces, whether it be a putting green or actually some of the baseball fields and football fields, to have very good drainage. But what that doesn't give is it doesn't give a lot of background nutrition. So right after this, we put fertilizer down, a good heavy starter fertilizer, a 10-10-10, so that we have both nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. We have all of those nutrients in there. And now it's kind of perked up after this. But just 12 days in, this is the kind of establishment you might expect, particularly if you don't have any background nutrition on a bentgrass putting green. Again, this is 20 different varieties replicated 3 times, so you can see the 5x5 blocks that are there. Now, last but not least, I want to highlight another trial that we're not doing at South Farms. This is at one of our cooperative sites, Bellerive Country Club, and we're actually trying to establish warm season putting green varieties here. So historically, we've been all cool season putting green varieties and exclusively creeping bentgrass. But now that we're seeing some climate change, there is potential that we could have some of these warm season varieties. And they actually do have some advantages. One of them is there's less disease normally on these varieties, but they're also are going to be more robust during our hot summertime temperatures as opposed to our cool season varieties, which really struggle. Creeping bentgrass really struggles during the heat of summer. So just to highlight, we established these on August 30th of 2019. That's a little later in the summer than we normally would like to establish. So we're actually seeing some of those growing pains still coming in 2020. But to highlight some of these warm season varieties, the first is Seashore Paspalum. So we have 4 different varieties, again, replicated 3 times. That has actually come in really well. You can see how thick and matted that turf grass is. So that is actually established really well in St. Louis. And one other thing I want to point out is that we've actually covered this green over the winter, and that's something that we think we're going to have to do. That will protect from winter kill, and we're going to do that at least the first couple years to try and get this green established like we normally would. The second species that we're evaluating is zoysia grass, and you can tell that that looks pretty poor. So this has actually been sprayed with a herbicide, been sprayed with fusilade. That is something to try and keep the Bermuda grass and the Seashore Paspalum out so that we can only evaluate the zoysia. Now, one thing to point out about establishing these warm season grasses is that we don't have seed to work with. So we actually had to plug these in and hope that the grasses would actually knit themselves in. Well, one thing we know about zoysia is that it doesn't grow very quickly, particularly in the first year or 2 of establishment. So in this case, we always say that zoysia, the first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, and the third year it leaps. Well, the thing is Bermuda grass and Seashore Paspalum are all leaping here, and they're actually getting into those zoysia grass plots. And that's why they don't look quite as full. There's a couple that are doing well in there, but for the most part, the zoysia hasn't quite come in yet. We might have some struggles to try and keep that zoysia grass plot pure out of the Bermuda and the Seashore Paspalum that are on either side of it. Last but not least is Bermuda grass. Bermuda grass is commonly used in the southeast and southern portions of the country. And here we're evaluating 9 different Bermuda grass varieties. And some of them are actually coming in very, very well. So like the Seashore Paspalum, you can see that they've kind of jumped, and those plugs that we have put in have really kind of knitted in. So we're excited about this trial. We're going to cover it again this winter to get even more establishment. And hopefully when we get into next year, we'll even be able to evaluate things like green speed and look at some of the other characteristics of these grasses. And maybe we'll even, since I'm a turf grass pathologist, maybe we'll even have diseases start coming into these in next year, and we'll be able to evaluate some of those. So thank you very much for your attention. That's what we have going in some of our turf grass program here at the University of Missouri. If you have any questions, this is my contact information, and have a great day.